Finding good employees for your nonprofit can be challenging. In this next panel, learn how to attract and retain prospective employees who care about your mission. I'd like to now turn it over to our next group of panelists, Sunit Velez, Human Resource Consultant at Paychex, Nolan Celia, Senior District Manager at ADP, Tom Ferrantino, Regional Sales Director at First Nonprofit, and now I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, Nancy Castillo, VP of Operations at Financial Health Network.
Thank you, Shivani, and nice to meet, nice to be here with everyone, Nolan, Sunit, and Tommy. Thank you all for joining us today. So let's dive right in. There was a lot of really interesting stuff that's happened so far, and so we're here to really round it out for everyone. You know, one of the things that I think, all of us in nonprofits for sure are experiencing is just the tight labor market that we're in. It's been difficult to recruit people in this pandemic moment. And some experts say that just given the trends that we're going to see, that hiring is going to be difficult throughout this next decade. So given that, what advice do you have for nonprofits about how we can attract candidates that are both really qualified to do the important work that we want folks to do, while also having a passion for the mission of the organization? And Suna, I'd love to start with you, and then have us all have a discussion about that.
Sure. So every business, large and small, they must generate ways to appeal to potential job applicants. But since job candidates can come from a wide range of diverse backgrounds, a one-size-fits-all approach generally won't work. So keeping diversity and inclusion top of mind in your recruiting efforts. Diversity can result in a stronger, more diversified workplace. Organizations that gain a reputation for prioritizing diverse hiring may attract stronger pool of talented candidates and perhaps enjoy an increased loyalty amongst a target audience and cohorts that value social responsibility. Also, understanding what's important to that particular demographic. For example, millennials and Gen Zs, they might be looking for flexible office hours, opportunity for telecommuting, compressed work week. Another point I really want to drive on this is, as much as recruiting and talent management is a function of HR, it's also a function of your marketing team and marketing department, and the two should collaborate. Consider what a potential applicant sees when they look at your company. Are your mission, vision, and values reflected in your company's website, social media platforms, job ads? It's even helpful to look at the stock photography that you've chosen for creative imagery on your sites and recruiting collateral. Make sure that visual aspects of your recruiting communicates and reflects who your company wants to be. All of these efforts can result in a company profile that's appealing to new job applicants, and it may be the crucial factor in determining what those applicants think when they look at your business as a place where they might want to work.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, I think the points you made about just how we can be really creative in recruiting, and just that importance of brand, right? Like at any given moment, someone is looking at your website, someone's looking at your materials, whether you have a job posting or not that you think you're hiring, like you're always sort of hiring, right? And out in view. Nolan, what thoughts do you have on this?
So yeah, I mean, I think starting out with what you're saying about branding is so critical. And it's interesting, as I was listening to some of what the last panelists were talking about, I also think when, it's important that not-for-profits are looking at technology as a way to engage with their employees, and making sure when they're recruiting people that they're making the process smooth and easy for their new hire employees to get onboarded, and leveraging, there's so much technology out there to make that process easy for clients. And, it's something just personally, what I do with a lot of our clients at ADP is I help put in place those kind of technologies, along with some of the things as far as strategy that Susanette's talking about, as far as, okay, how can we adjust our branding and the way we're presenting ourselves to our potential hires. And I've been doing that for 6 years at ADP, and it's been an evolving experience for not-for-profits, because again, something I've kind of heard in the previous conversations, they're a little bit slower to adopt some of these new technologies, but it's important for them to do that, to engage with their new employees and the younger demographics. And the great thing is, another thing that I keep hearing in the conversations of of the summit here are, a huge asset that not-for-profits have is their mission. So being able to promote that, young generations love the idea of meaningful work, and we're talking about this great resignation. A lot of this stuff kind of overlaps. A lot of people leaving business, like their current jobs, because it's monotonous, or it's not what they wanted in their life. And so these young kids, these younger demographics want something meaningful. And when you promote that as a not-for-profit, it's really going to help attract new employees, and then making sure you have the technology to back that up so that when they come on board, it's smooth, it's easy, they can enroll in benefits quickly, they can see what those benefits are, and you can make it very, very attractive from an experience and a user experience coming on board.
Yeah, you hit on a lot of really good things there. I mean, I think your point about connecting with the technology piece to that last panel, one thing that came to mind for me is even just so like in your recruiting process, how do you think about like tools like Calendly or other things that will streamline recruitment? And then I think I heard you say a lot, Nolan, just have technology really throughout, so you have a really good user experience, but then also it carries forward so that you really can retain your customers. So like, or your employees. So like it's sort of an end to end. You both have touched on this idea of benefits, and I want to dive into that a little bit. So that you talked about, if you have benefits around having flexible work schedules, like that's something you want to promote. You want to, Nolan, you talked about this idea of people are attracted to your mission, right? They're not just gonna, they don't just want to get paid. They do want to get paid, but they also want something bigger. So I want to talk about this a little bit. In kind of relation to one of the benefits that I feel like a lot of organizations right now are really trying to promote is, as we're moving into hybrid work environments, they're saying you can work from home, you can work from whatever state you might want to be in. We're having a lot of folks moving in different places. I think there's an important labor question here though, or for organizations. How does actually hiring staff outside of your state or in another country, which like the technology panel even talked about a little bit too, how does that affect nonprofits in terms of how they think about wages, hours, tax withholding, labor laws? Tommy, do you have some thoughts on this one? And also just any thoughts of
yeah. Well, when you're hiring employees out of state, you have to deal with those respective departments of labor. So, for example, if I hired Nolan in New York and he lived in New Jersey, it wouldn't be New York State Department of Labor. I'd still have to pay unemployment, state unemployment tax to New Jersey. So you have to deal with, you have to look into these other Department of Labors, because the unemployment benefit is going to be different in other states. Like New Jersey pays a higher benefit than New York, so which means you're going to have a higher tax rate. So there are other expenses that you have to consider. Plus, there are different states have different benefit periods as well. Some can do 20 weeks as opposed to 26 weeks. Some can do 30 weeks as opposed to 26 weeks. So again, that all comes into your cost factor. So that's something that you need to consider. So you either have to figure out if you are going to reimburse, pay state tax, or jump into a third-party program. Now, if you're reimbursing, it's a little bit easier because you're just going to get billed from those respective states. But again, the expenses are going to be higher. And same with if you're in a third-party program, that's probably the easiest because you're paying one flat rate, and then the third-party program is dealing with the respective departments of labor. So that's one way to streamline it.
That's interesting. Okay, that's really helpful, I think, for folks to know. What are other thoughts that folks have about? Well, actually, there's a question that's coming now. How can you compete with unemployment benefit to retain employees? Do you have any thoughts on that, Tommy?
Pay more. Yeah, I'm being sarcastic. It's a little, and I get that question a lot this year. It's a little hard to compete with unemployment. Yeah, obviously there's the answer, pay more. But you got to understand something. When the mindset behind people staying out on unemployment, even with that federal subsidy of $300, was the cost of non-commuting. So like Nolan was getting at, when you're working remote, you don't have to worry about commuter costs. You don't have to worry about daycare costs. These are things that, by staying home, you're saving money. So it's kind of like a pay raise. So at that point, you have to ask yourself, is it more beneficial to offer remote work? Now, some positions lend themselves to that.
Yeah.
Some don't, so that's the trade-off. So there's really no clear way to answer that question. I would have to say it would come down to the types of benefits that you're offering. So, if you have somebody that is required to come in where remote working is not going to work out for them, then maybe look at some of, offsetting some of their commuter costs. Maybe they're not, maybe they're taking mass transit, maybe get them, some kind of a transit budget or, stipend for that. I know that tends to help out a lot, if you, especially if, costs of rail and bus and taxi and Uber and all that stuff is pretty high. So if you could offset that cost, that could be a benefit. Childcare cost, that's a huge bailiwick. So if you in lieu of pay, if you're offering some kind of either on-premise childcare, maybe you're subsidizing the cost of childcare, maybe you can get a group rate, so that, and that for the business is always a write-off, so even in a nonprofit organization, that's something you're not paying taxes on, so that the nonprofit organization can probably get a more cost-effective price as opposed to the individual, and therefore that's a better trade-off than payroll sometimes. So those are some ideas that I would.
Yeah,
I would love to chime in on this one.
please.
In the 2021 Paychecks Pulse of HR report, which is a report that we conduct surveying many HR professionals, it indicated that 76% report that workplace culture is key to successful hiring and retention. And in the last year, these HR professionals have built or enhanced their company culture by developing a training program. 40% of them said that that's what they did. Another 39% said that providing remote and flexible work options, as we've been discussing, is another way. And then communicating the culture to the team. And that starts with your onboarding process and recruiting process, as we previously discussed, is communicating that. There's a comment here in the chat that says, value, be more. Demonstrating your values and your cultures from the onset of the development of that relationship with that candidate to getting them to be an employee and assimilating them into your culture. So culture shaping matters. Benefits do matter, but thinking beyond the traditional benefits, right, of medical, dental, the health stuff, even having career pathing opportunities. Individuals are motivated intrinsically and extrinsically, right? The intrinsic is recognition and rewards. Showing them, hey, you're going to start here, but here's where you can go, in our organization. Here's this path. In fact, share a story of someone a success story in your organization of someone who came in entry level and, grew, and here they are now. I've got tons of stories of individuals at Paychecks that started in payroll department and are now managers and senior managers, and have grown into the HR professional role. So I think, thinking holistically about the person is really helpful. Additionally, we're seeing things like EAP, mental health, and wellness benefits, financial wellness benefits, where they get an education on, budgeting and even access to payday loans that are a lot less than, those mom and pop corner shops that offer those high interest, loans that are they're able to manage through payroll deductions. So partnering with an organization like Paychecks, a professional employer organization, it helps with providing, Fortune 500 benefits on a smaller scale. ADP does the same exact thing. I'm going to shout them out.
I see Nolan like, I want to get in on this.
Yeah, no, well, it's like what Susanette's saying is so spot on. I think I was going to say that you got to it, which was the career pathing thing, and having that in a place, like you say, with Paychecks, you're the professional employer organization, or, that's what I do here at ADP is ADP Total Source, which is a professional employer organization where, non-for-profits can share in compliance responsibility with ADP while at the same time being able to roll out these Fortune 500 benefits and have an expert, kind of like Suzanne is for paychecks, have an expert on the ADP side to support them. And I think to that point is having that strategic partnership helps. Okay, what strategies can we do? And then having a technology that can roll out, hey, here's a career path. You mentioned, payday loans, another thing that is coming out and ADP's rolled out. We have this thing called a Wisely card. So employees have access to their pay prior to their actual pay date, which is a nice thing. Yeah. We mentioned financial wellness. So being able to, one of the things I think that's really exciting that we're trying to do is have an open source approach where if there are other platforms out there, like we have a partner called this gift of college. So employees that might have college student loans are trying to pay off, setting up an automatic deduction for that. And, ADP, we don't do that ourselves. What we do is we have an integration with a partner that the clients can, partner with, and then it integrates in with ADP payroll. And it makes it very easy to do that kind of gift of college and making it easy for them to pay off their student loans. So, I mean, creativity in the benefits section,
yes.
Making sure your medical and your dental is like rock solid, that's got to be there, and making sure it's a Fortune 500 suite, but then having these perks of discount. And another one we do is, phone bill discounts.
Discounts, yes.
Yeah, corporate discounts. It's like when they're on the platform with us, they can offer these corporate discounts like a Fortune 500 type company. So finding those type of partnerships can really help, and figuring out creative ways to expand the benefits to be very robust and have that kind of Fortune 500 feel. Because the truth is they're competing with Fortune 500 companies. Amazon's, the Walmart's of the world, the Starbucks of the world, they're increasing pay, like Tommy was talking about, and then they're rolling out all these crazy benefits. I read
college tuition.
Yeah, I saw Amazon. I saw it in the Wall Street Journal. Amazon's
Amazon, yep.
So, got to get creative and be looking for partnerships that can help you with that for sure.
So to that point, so there's a couple of threads. You guys threw out a lot of stuff out there. Some of it I knew, some of it is like new. I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't know about that. Two questions. So one is, how can nonprofits kind of understand, right, this ecosystem, right, of creative benefits and really think about ones that like maybe can have that additional benefit of being like a tax benefit, right? Something that they can underwrite. Like, how do they, you said something about Nolan, like do partnerships so you can explore this. Say a little bit more about, like, I'm a nonprofit, I'm like hearing this and saying, hey, wait, I don't know where I can get a tax benefit of that or not. Who do I go to? Who's my resource? How do I find out more about?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, Suzanne gave me a plug. Reach out to me. There's certainly ways we can, or paychecks, with Suzanne and her team, and Tommy too. I know I'd read about what he was doing with state unemployment and figuring out the partnerships that are out there. Reach out to us and say, hey, what are you doing with your other not-for-profits that can help reduce kind of the operating expenses that you're facing from a medical perspective, from a tax perspective. Also, one of the things we can do is reduce risk, mitigate some of the risk where now, some of those non-operating expenses that you might face, there is a certain risk of having employees too, that you want to make sure you're buttoned up on too, the compliance side of things. So it's really engaging with experts like us and saying, okay, and then kind of evaluating those options and saying, hey, what options do we have? How do they compare to each other? And what's the best fit for us as an organization to partner and leverage these large company and partnership opportunities to find those tax benefits and attract employees.
That's really helpful.
And a lot, and to what Nolan was saying, also look in your own backyard. You have professionals that you've already employed. You have your accountants, you have your insurance brokers. Talk to them, ask them, hey, listen, is there some way that we could be partnered and save some money, have some incentives? Your benefits manager, at your insurance agency will talk to you about alternative benefits, different types of health care plans, long-term care plans that you could put into place for employees, life insurance plans. So these are different types of even pet insurance.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's a new type of benefit, which
There's been a lot of COVID.
when I
benefits.
say
I
it,
know a
people
lot of
laugh at me and
people-
think I'm crazy, but you know, this
true.
No,
10
that's
years
true.
ago, this started to hit the scene, and it's blown up since. And it's an actual useful type of plan. People love their pets, you know, so
Yeah.
and veterinary bills are ridiculous.
are.
So that's a different type of an incentive.
Exactly. And I think, you know, we started talking about this, you know, with the lens of recruitment, but really a lot of what you're talking about, and you guys are really expanding it, like this is about also retaining your employees.
Yes.
There's a couple of things I want to chat about. And then I know there's a question in the chat. I see you, Brianne, and I'm going to ask your question in a minute. But first, you know, so you mentioned something, Nolan, about part of this is like, how do we manage our operating expenses, right? To be able to offer some of these benefits that are going to cost some money. There are some benefits that like don't, right? Like things about that you can do in your culture or just that are embedded in your everyday work. But there's some things, right, that like, you know, are going to cost a little bit. So thinking about keeping your operating expenses in mind, right? And how to maximize savings. Tommy, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the marketplace, in particular around key challenges nonprofits might be facing as it relates to some of this unemployment insurance trends, and what nonprofits can do to handle this. I'd love for you to talk about that.
Well, it's a fun fact. A lot of nonprofits aren't quite sure that they can do this. Some are aware of it, some aren't. But you're not beholden to just pay state unemployment tax. You know, so that alone is a huge expense, especially now. Because of the pandemic, insurance rates have gone up all across the board. Property casualty rates, workers' comp rates, healthcare rate, everything's going up. So, you know, the one thing that you could do to repurpose money and put it back into your organization is look for areas where you could save, and unemployment insurance is one of those areas. So, for example, if a state is paying, if a nonprofit is paying into the state tax, they're paying probably 30% more than they should be paying, versus a third-party program like my company, First Nonprofit. We offer alternatives to that. Now, a nonprofit organization has three choices. They could pay the state tax. They could be a reimburser where they pay the state back on a quarterly basis as the state covers their claims, or they could go into a third-party administrator. The problem with the first two options, okay, paying the state tax is a full risk transfer program, but it's going to cost a significant amount of money. Nonprofits are risk pooled. So even if you had no COVID claims this year, doesn't matter, because next year you're going to get hit over the head with a high rate, okay? The rate is supposed to go up to 9.8% in New York, okay? So even if you had no claims, it doesn't matter. You're still going to be paying that higher rate or close to it. Being a reimburser, kind of, especially nowadays, it's a little tricky because you have no budgetary certainty. Now, last year, reimbursers got lucky because the feds bailed out 50% of the claims. The state came in at the 11th hour and bailed out the other 50%. What they don't know is their third and fourth quarter bills this year are going to be astronomically high, because all of those trickle over claims from last year are still being paid out this year. Okay. So if you filed a claim in July, it's still being paid out.
Mm-hmm.
So the first and second quarters, you were subsidized by the feds 50% and 75% respectively. So the third and fourth quarter claims are now at 100%. So they're going to see bills that they haven't seen in the last 5 or 6 years. They're going to be ridiculously high. Plus, there's state extended benefits, which they haven't factored into their expense portfolio yet, because with the removal of that $300 federal stipend, most of these claims trickled over or starting to trickle over to state extended benefits. So these are expenses that the nonprofit should be aware of. Now, to curtail those, there are solutions. You know, going into a full risk transfer program that's not the state, kind of like what we do, would save them about 30% on their overall cost. Provide them with budgetary certainty, which, by the way, reimbursers right now run the risk of walking face first into a D&O claim. Because if the third and fourth quarter bills come out and they're higher than what they budgeted for, the boards are going to ask questions. And that could lead to, you know, allegations of money mismanagement and things of that nature, which could trigger D&O claims. And it's reflected in your current directors and officers insurance rates because they went up dramatically because they anticipated this. So having a third-party program kind of curtails some of this. So you're going to save 30%. You're going to have a third-party administrator to help you deal with your claims with the Department of Labor. So that's going to save you 15% on claims expenses. And then you'll receive back a credit that you could repurpose towards your ongoing unemployment expense. So if you're in the state tax over the next 5 years, the rate's expected to go up. Being in a third-party program over the next 5 years, your rates will come down. So that money that you're saving, you can now repurpose and put it back into programs, put it back into other benefits, incentivize employees, and that's the best way to pay for additional benefits.
Right. That's where you want to be investing in your staff. Right.
Exactly.
They're
You want to
better
save money on your
than
expenses and
doing more.
repurpose it back into your staff and to whatever the calling of your organization is.
Right. Right. Exactly. Sue Annette, Nolan, do you have anything to add to this particular topic?
Go ahead, Susan.
I know I called on you both. Go ahead, Sue Annette.
So just kind of thinking about it, from a strategic perspective, concrete, black and white, plan, budget, Tommy is the expert here on that unemployment and how it works. My perspective comes from the place of reducing that turnover. I know there was not a whole lot we can do with what happened during the pandemic. Future state, important to consider, some of that turnover that happened that had nothing to do with the pandemic, doing a root cause analysis, understanding why. What I have seen in my work is it's really nothing to do with the employees themselves. Sometimes it's leadership and investing in leadership development, investing in those individuals who are working with your employees, making sure that the leadership is innovative, willing to inspire and help develop these employees, knowing how to speak to them. Those are some really important skills that help retain your employees. I'm sure we've all heard it said, right? Employees don't leave companies, they leave their managers. And so let's work on upskilling these managers and having some leadership development in an organization that will ultimately trickle down to reducing this turnover. Healthy turnover is great, right? Normal attrition is great. You're bringing in fresh eyes, people are getting promoted. That's wonderful. But the adverse of that is having to separate, terminating. And sometimes there's things that we can't, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm sorry. We can't prevent, right? If someone resigns, goes to another organization, and Tommy, you can talk a little bit more about this, is that charge method. I resign from here, I go work over here reduces my hours or lets me go. My hit is on my prior company, even though I resigned. And just educating, our organizations on understanding what that charge method means, because you might get hit for something that you normally wouldn't have budgeted or planned for. So,
and that's a great point, Sue, and I saw that a lot during the pandemic. Being the HR person or being a CFO, you really should understand how the labor laws work. And a lot of them didn't, especially reimbursers. If you're in the state tax, you don't really notice it because the state just pays it and that's that. But if you're a reimburser, you start to notice it because you're getting billed back for these things. So, what ends up happening is, like Sue Annette said, if I was working for an organization and I voluntarily left and I went to work for another organization and it just didn't work out, I got fired, reduced hours, whatever, and I went out on unemployment, the prior organization gets charged back for the first 2 quarters of my unemployment. So, a lot of organizations are not aware of that. And if you're reimbursing, you find that out the hard way. So what had happened was, a lot of, natural attrition, they move into different positions and stuff like that. And then, they have to get shut down or laid off or whatever the case may be. And now, the organization that didn't expect to have any unemployment claims starts having unemployment claims, and right away they naturally think it's fraud. Okay, which was another problem during the pandemic. Which, especially if you're a reimburser, the state didn't care if it was fraudulent or not. You got charged for fraudulent claims, and even if you told the state, "Hey, look, these are fraud," they go, "That's nice, pay us anyway." When you figure it out and you got proof, you let us know, we'll give you credit on the next bill.
Yeah.
With our clients, that didn't happen because the TPAs caught that right away. Okay. Again, we also educate our clients as to, what to expect as far as unemployment goes. So, having somebody to ask a question to, I think, is also very, very helpful, especially, the HR departments, because trying to call the Department of Labor on a good day,
Right.
That's a challenge. Nowadays, forget about it. It's almost like a legend if it happens. So, having somebody like us to contact and say, "Hey, I got a question about unemployment. Can you take a look at my loss history for me? Can you let me," or even the third-party administrators that help you dispute their claims. And it's another thing. A lot of people don't realize you could dispute a claim. As long as it's not a lack of work claim, if it's for a cause, you could dispute that claim.
Yeah.
Trying to dispute it directly with the Department of Labor, again, challenge. Having someone there to help you do it for you, provide representation at hearings, legal representation when necessary, worth its weight, and at a reduced cost, it's even better.
Yeah. So I think Nolan has a comment perhaps, and also we had a question come in about how long an employee has to work to collect unemployment benefits. So I don't know if Nolan, you can answer that and add whatever else you wanted.
Man, that might be a better question for Tommy. I would defer to him as the expert on state unemployment. I was only going to say, and I think Tommy and Sunette really hit a nail on the head. It's kind of like work with partnerships to understand all these layers of reducing turnover, making sure you're understanding all the pieces that and the tools at your disposal when it comes to state unemployment. I mean, what our clients do is when they're on our platform, they pretty much offload, Tommy's talking about a third-party administrator, they pretty much offload the risk to us completely. And they literally sit on our, on our federal tax ID and our state unemployment. They get our state unemployment rate as ADP total source. And it becomes a situation where it eliminates the administrative burden of trying to dispute claims or work through those problems of state unemployment. And obviously, if they're growing into different states and adding employees in different states, very easy to do because we've already set that up and they're able to just jump on and we roll it out for them. So, those resources right here in this group are a great way to start going, hey, how do we manage this and eliminate some of those problems? But when it comes to how long an employee has to work to that specific question, I'd probably pass it back to Tommy. He may know better than me, or Surnette probably knows as well.
Yeah, it's immediate. So, and I say, so if I start working day one with a new organization and they fire me, I'm eligible for unemployment benefits on the day that I got terminated. Because
what if they leave voluntarily? That was also the second part.
Even if I quit voluntarily, I could still file. Because the claim is going to go back to my previous employer. Now it's up to the previous employer at that point to dispute that claim. Okay, so that's the trick. Now, when you're in the state tax, nobody's letting you know that I'm filing a claim. You're just gonna get billed. Well, the state just pays it. Okay, if you're a reimburser, you might get a bill and then you could dispute it at that point, or you might get a notification, you can dispute it at that point. And then if the dispute goes through, then I'd have to pay back whatever I collected as far as unemployment goes. Having a third-party administrator, you get notified the second I make the claim, so it gets cut off before it even becomes an issue. So having that little buffer is helpful. But to answer the question, you're eligible for benefits almost immediately when you get terminated. I mean, there's a 7-day waiting period, obviously, that they put back into place for 2021, or at least the tail end of it. But you're eligible immediately because it's going to go roll back to your previous employer.
Right.
And
Okay.
to that point, you
Mhm.
know, rolling back to your previous, you have to have work history. So
Mhm.
you might start in a particular place, you're eligible right away there, but they're going to look back at the last 4 quarters
Yeah.
of the claim date. So depending on what that looks like, if you have enough, then so there's a component of, you know, yes, the employer is going to be liable
Well,
for some of the costs,
you
but then
had
the
to have
employee.
been,
Mhm.
yeah, you had to have been employed within within the 4th quarter of your previous employer. So then
Right.
the look back is just 1 quarter back. So, you know, if it's the 1st quarter this year, you had to be employed at least within the 4th quarter of your previous employment. If you had no work history, then obviously they're going to deny you benefit.
Right.
You know, but
Right,
that,
right. You have to
you
have
know, I mean,
that.
unless you're coming off of a, you know, a no doc type of job,
Sure.
it's sort of rare. You know, I mean, the year that passed, you know, there was everybody was eligible. It didn't matter if you had no previous work employee, you know, if you were a gig worker, you know, off the books, didn't matter. There was different pandemic
Right.
programs available to you. But to answer the question, you know, normally would be almost immediately.
That's really helpful. I want to talk about something that Sue, Annette, and Nolan, you both raised, and I want to dive in a little bit more deeply. And it's this concept of a benefit, right, that employers are now really thinking about for their employees so that they can access their earned wages earlier, right, than their payday would hit. And Nolan, you talked about a particular product that you all have. And I want to talk about this a little bit more because really now more than ever, right, we've talked about just how difficult the hiring market is, but even today, right, with the employees we do have, now more than ever, right, employees at all income levels are really struggling, right, to manage their finances and to be resilient and seek opportunity, right? And at Financial Health Network, right, we call it financial health. And so, and we know that this, you know, has a negative effect on how people can do their jobs, right? If people are focused on like thinking about how am I going to, you know, make ends meet, how am I going to pay that credit card bill at the end of the month, you know, they struggle to stay focused, they struggle to stay productive, they struggle to really thrive and help do the work of mission, you know, of what the nonprofit is seeking to do. So say a little bit more about the role that you all think employers play in their employees' financial health, and say a little bit more about either, you know, the earned wage access programs or other things that employers can be doing to look out for their employees' financial health. Because also, right, the way in which the world works now, employees are really looking to employers to help them in this, in this challenge they have. So I don't know who wants to go first.
Go ahead, Susan.
Thank you. So yeah, Paychex also offers a similar type of product where you can, you know, get your wages immediately on a card, but just kind of high level to that. You know, financial health is so important, and having the education. I'm a teacher at heart. You know, HR professionals tend to be, and so really educating and having a partner and a resource to leverage in that education process, whether it is the employee assistance program that has a component of that, or a product. When you partner with Paychex, we offer you a benefit called Finfit, and it's really, you know, a consultation. It's a consultation. It's a budgeting tool. It is an assessment. It's actually creating a plan for individuals to meet their goals. So, you know, that's super important. And another thing is a 401k or 403b. You know, those retirement planning tools that can be offered and are part of the robust product and services that both Paychex and ADP offer, you know, is another great opportunity for individuals to think and plan for the future. So, and just a side note, New York City, for those of you who may not have a 403b or 401k, they just enacted a law that is going to require employers, I think of 10 employees or more, it just came out, to have some sort of retirement plan. And you have to, the employers are responsible for collecting this money and sending it over to whatever this city-run program is. Well, partnering with an organization like us, I say Paychex, ADP, and I'm not sure about First Nonprofit, but we offer a built-in 401k, 403b plan that is managed part of the services, third-party administration, record-keeping support, and streamlined and integrated with the payroll. So all of those features, again, the Fortune 500 benefit offering by partnering with an organization like a PEO is super helpful.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nolan.
Yeah, I was going to chime in because I think Suanette hit on a lot of great points there, and I just wanted to reiterate the idea of, well, you caught that idea of the Wisely card that we have. So obviously, Paychex, we both offer that. So that's obviously great to be able to have immediate access. As Suanette mentioned, the education piece. So I know a big part of what our clients are getting from us is trainings they can roll out to their employees. Our HR business partners like Suanette can go into their client offices or more remotely. It used to be in office, obviously, the last 18 months, 2 years, more remote, but they're starting to go back in office and say, hey, you want to roll out a financial wellness and education program for your employees? Let's do it, and they can work with the leaders to set that up. One thing that I didn't hear mentioned that I think is worth mentioning, there's a couple things. First of all, I would go back to the partnerships and having a partner that is willing to work with other partners. So I mentioned it before with the Wisely card or the gift of college, but one of the big things that ADP does is with whatever platform you're on with ADP, we have this thing called the marketplace. And the best way to describe it is it's like the app store for ADP. So, ADP is like your phone, the marketplace is like the app store, and you can go out there and you can say, gift of college. I'm looking at a list here. Finfit is one of our partner companies too. So there's built-in connections and data flow that makes it easy as you're managing your payroll, managing your benefits with your employees, to roll out some of these financial wellness strategies and tools that you can put in place for your employees. The last thing I would throw out there also is I'm a big fan, and so I'm an advocate, but I'm not saying it's for everybody, but I think HSA healthcare accounts are a really valuable financial resource for employees. It's a way to give them a small raise. It's a way to give them a savings account. It's a way to give them protection against medical costs down the road. It's money that they get to keep long-term. They can invest it. It's a way for the company to bring down costs for the organization and at the same time bring down the cost for their employees, because the scary thing about HSAs is, it's this high deductible, right? So that's everybody's like, I don't want a high deductible. Okay, fair enough. But the value is you have a lower premium, so the monthly cost is less for both the company and the employee. And if the company's generous, which they should be, at least give some money to the employees, and the employees should be smart, and the company should educate them on, put some of the money you would have otherwise been putting into a traditional premium in a traditional plan, take that money and save it for your health costs, put it in your HSA, start to grow this nest egg for healthcare expenses, and year over year, they start to build that. The best example I use, and I tell this to my clients all the time, is my own father, who about 15 years got involved in an HSA. He told me about it. I was like, I don't know. I was like in my 20s. I was like, whatever. But now he's like, oh yeah, I've got $55,000 saved in that HSA account. It's, way beyond anything, there's out-of-pocket max limits on healthcare plans per year. So he's got way more money than the out-of-pocket max could ever hit him for. So it's a great financial tool for both the organization and the businesses, and organizations get scared of it. Once they understand it, it's great. And the cool thing is you can offer an HSA and a traditional plan and let the employees make that choice for themselves.
I love that. I'm so glad you brought that up, Nolan.
Yeah, I think this is really key. Some things that I take away from this particular part of the conversation is one that I think the one size doesn't fit all thing that you were talking about, Suanette, about recruitment, I think applies here too, because I think a person's financial life or a household's financial life is complex. It's their own. And so having the employer have a variety of options to help that person in their financial life wherever they are, I think is really crucial, which is why I like this concept of it's about a financial wellness program. It's not about just this one product we could do or this one training we could do. It's like, how do we really build this into a person's experience so they could just be, thinking about their financial health in mind. So at Financial Health Network, we have like a whole employer toolkit also is like another thing that people could leverage, right? To think about this whole end-to-end solution, right? And really knowing your employees and what they need is a first key step, right? So I think they're going to cut us off in a couple of minutes. And so I want to make sure I asked Brianna's question. How are organizations, this is kind of getting back to living remotely. The question is, how are organizations getting away with having staff live temporarily in another country as a benefit of remote work? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Well, I could probably speak to that. I mean, if they're, when you say temporarily, do they have to have a permanent location?
So maybe they're saying how staff is maybe saying, oh, my permanent location is in the States, but they're like living temporarily elsewhere. Okay, so that doesn't change, so, maybe? Yeah. That's what I'm assuming maybe this happens.
To illustrate that, because I had something similar. If my permanent location's in Buffalo and I'm temporarily in Canada and working remote, then I would be considered a New York employee. So, at that point, all Department of Labor laws and stuff like that would have to correspond with New York State labor law. If I was a resident of Canada and living in New York and working temporarily in New York, different animal. I'm not eligible for unemployment benefits. Okay. So it depends on where the permanent location is. I mean, you can work remotely anywhere. So if I'm a permanent resident of New York and I'm working, from Spain, that's fine. I'm still eligible for unemployment. I'm still eligible for benefits, workers' comp, disability, whatever the labor laws for that particular state would apply.
Yeah, I think part of the question Brianna has is like, is there a timeline, right? That you could live in New York and live in Canada before that line is crossed of permanent residency. And in some ways, I'm wondering, Tommy, is this all based on just what an employee is saying, this is my permanent, and just the employer is kind of following that, but they're not really in the realm to do like checks on that?
Well, yes and no. There are certain pieces of identification that would have to be New York based or correspond with the state that they're saying that they're domiciled in, like a driver's license, proof of residency, like a mortgage bill, rent bill, something like that. PO boxes are going to cut it. You'd have to have some kind of document. Your passport would have to be, domiciled at a particular domestic state. So, it goes by that. As far as time frame goes, the majority of the time, I believe the cutoff is about 6 months. So you can go half and half, but anything more than that, even interstate. Because if I said I'm a New York resident, I spent 8 months of my life in Florida. Well, guess what? I'm not a New York resident, really, am I? So
I was going to say New York State has those laws. There's so many people doing exactly what you're talking about, Tommy, whether it's they live in Jersey, they work in New York, or they have an apartment in New York and commute in from, further out in Connecticut, or they live down in Florida half the year. Like you said, I think it is 6 months, and maybe state to state even. New York has a 6 month and maybe Florida has 7. I don't know.
Might be state dependent.
Every state's a little bit different. No, I mean, but for the most part, they're kind of within the same time frame. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it depends upon where you spend the majority of your time. That also dictates, what type of labor law they have to follow.
If I could come in here, because I'm the HR professional, and my fire alarms and red flags are going up.
Yeah,
good.
And I'm like, can you see it on my face? So yes, technically, yes, 6 months, technically, yes, you're in New York, address reflects the state, but you're elsewhere, right? Mm-hmm. But you have to take into consideration the international laws. You have to take into consideration, what they think, if you're going to be in Canada, or if you're going to be working in, somewhere in Europe, you really do need to take into consideration this whole idea of globalization and the impact that it's going to have to your organization and what you don't know, right? There could be insurances, there could be tax implications on either sides. So my recommendation is caution.
Yep.
Seek out partners, seek out subject matter experts in this area, talk to an immigration attorney, talk to a corporate attorney that specializes in international law and taxes to make sure that you're not overstepping any bounds. That's what I would say.
And
and certainly if you're going to engage in the hiring process and hire people that are going to be working, you know, in other states, other countries, whatever, you want to talk to your professionals as well. You want to talk to your accountants and see what the tax, implications are. You want to talk to your insurance personnel to see what the insurance implications are, because at least just from workers' comp perspective on that, you know, if you have employees in a different state, you don't have to buy workers' comp in that state. You can still insure them under a New York State workers' comp. You just got to put them in a different column. If they're in a different country, you have to buy a specific endorsement for your policy to cover people in that country, even to medevac them out. So, you know, these are things that you have to talk to your professionals about. That's why they're there. You talk to your accountants, you talk to your corporate attorneys, you talk to your insurance personnel, because these are. I mean, listen, if I have an employee in Canada, I'm obviously not offering them health insurance if they're a resident of Canada, you know. But if they're a temporary resident, then I have to, because it isn't free if you're not a citizen. So, you know, there's different implications that you have to discuss, not just unemployment stuff, but just all across the board, even payroll. You know, I mean, there has to be certain ramifications with that as well.
I think sorry, I was just going to say the simple answer to Brianna's question is, like, they're getting away with it until they're not, and it's a risk.
Exactly.
It's a risk.
And they need to talk to their experts to make sure they're aware of the risk and mitigating it, and do it. If they're aware of the risk and they're willing to take it, all right, that's your fault, you know.
Because you don't want to get stuck here and spend your time on dealing with that and not dealing with leadership training and like
the mission,
your staff, all the things that like you really want to be focusing your time on. So yes, caution and knowing that these are all risks. We're going to ask one last question. Oh, nope, that's it, because Sue answered already on the chat. Just quick. Well, thank you all so much. Like, we were able to go over because we're the last panel and we've had such a good time. So thank you all so much for joining us. This was great. Back to you, Shivani.
Thank you so much, Nancy, Nolan, Tommy, and Sue Annette. To everyone else that's still on the watching the webinar, I hope you enjoyed today's panel. I'll be sending a survey along with the recordings and contact details of the wonderful panelists this week. We'd really appreciate if you can do the survey so we can create an even better experience for next time. On behalf of NCheng LLP, thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions or comments or want to learn more about anything that was discussed today or about NCheng LLP, feel free to email me back. If you don't already follow NCheng on social media, follow us to stay up to date, and stay safe and have a wonderful rest of the day. Take care.